I was born in July 2001, just 2 months before the attacks of September 11th. My whole life, I have heard adults reflect on how they felt that morning, that their world had been ripped apart, that their sense of security was permanently compromised, that their lives had been neatly sliced into before and after. I suspect most of you could tell me exactly what you were doing when you heard the Twin Towers had fallen. And I know that my life has been shaped by 9/11 in more ways than I realize, but I have no firsthand account, no crystal clear memory of the way everything changed on that day. I can't tell you what I was eating or what I was wearing or what I thought when the news reached me. For me, there is no before and after 9/11. There is only after. I can, however, tell you exactly where I was on Simchat Torah 2 years ago. I had just begun a 7-month trip around Southeast Asia and was traveling with a friend for the first 10 days before going the rest of the way solo. I was wearing green shorts and a green t-shirt emblazoned with the logo of my favorite grocery store. We had just received our food at a tiny sushi restaurant where the chef spoke no English and some of the patrons smoked cigarettes indoors. And in between bites of tuna, my eyes followed one lazy wisp of smoke upwards before settling on a hazy TV monitor that clearly hadn't been wiped clean since the 1980s. And just like that, everything changed. The news coverage was in English, and my blood ran cold as I read the headline: Israel at war with Hamas, following deadly surprise attack. I turned to my friend and I said, my heart in my throat, in the understatement of the century, this is going to be a big deal. He followed my gaze to the TV screen. Oh no, he said, his face turning white. A lot of people are gonna die, aren't they? Sitting at that sushi bar, we had no concept of the protracted war that was yet to come, the number of parents who would bury their children across the Middle East, the sheer magnitude of destruction and agony that would sweep across the region. But that moment is crystal clear in my memory, the tuna fish turning to ash in my mouth. My world was torn apart, my sense of security permanently compromised, my life neatly sliced into before and after. As with 9/11, I'm sure many of you can pinpoint exactly where you were at the moment you heard about the attacks of October 7th. Maybe you were driving home from a long day at work. Maybe you were tucking your child into bed. Maybe you, like me, were out of the country, severed from your support systems and lost in a sea of questions and fear. There are infinite possibilities, but I know one thing for certain. Wherever you were the moment you heard, you have not been the same since. 1 year after October 7th, I was living in Israel for my first year of rabbinical school. The air hung heavy over Jerusalem. It felt as if October 8th had never come. Mothers were called up for reserve duty in the military. Children went to school in bomb shelters. Fathers woke up screaming or just stayed awake all night to avoid the nightmares. For the people of Israel, there was no before and after. There was no post-trauma because the trauma was ongoing and there was no end in sight. But time marched on, as it so often does, and Simchat Torah descended upon Jerusalem, the holy city, with a cruel irony. On Simchat Torah, we finish reading our people's holy book and then immediately begin again, ensuring the continuity of Jewish tradition, Jewish faith. But how could we begin again? How could we affirm our faith when we remain stuck in the nightmare of that previous year? At services that evening, Rabbi Tamar Applebaum of Kehilat Zion reminded us that the desperate struggle to balance the imperative joy of Simchat Torah with the tangible grief of our reality is nothing new to the Jewish people. How can we begin again? Rabbi Applebaum searched for an answer in the pages of history. Another Simchat Torah in another foreign country It was the night of Simchat Torah in 1655, and the Jews of Krakow were celebrating as they always did, sitting and dancing, singing and dancing, and making merry. But this time, their celebration was abruptly cut short. This time, the joy was replaced by violence and bloodshed. During the fourth Hakafah, the fourth circle around the synagogue, they heard the hoofbeats of galloping horses, and soon rioters splintered the wooden doors and unleashed a pogrom upon the revelers. According to tradition, hundreds of Jews were murdered, and many more were taken captive. A year later, 1656, the Jews of Krakow are faced with a terrible dilemma. How could they celebrate Simchat Torah while mourning the loss of those who were murdered? How could they not? Their response was remarkable. 1 year later, they removed the Torah scrolls from the ark, and they sang and danced and made merry, just like always. But in the middle of the fourth Hakafah, the celebration suddenly ceased. They returned the Torah scrolls to the ark and sat down on the floor. With small candles in hand, they recited slichot, penitential prayers, and keynote, elegies. The night of delight turned into a keen expression of mourning. But then there was another equally amazing, remarkable transformation, because they took the Torah scrolls back out of the ark and began dancing anew. They did not forget the fallen, nor did they join them in a living death void of all happiness. Rather, they honored the memories of their lost loved ones by choosing life. Nearly 400 years after that dark night in Krakow, and 1 year after the horrors of October 7th, we in Jerusalem followed their example. During the fourth Hakafah, we put the Torah scrolls back in the ark. We sat on the floor and let the grief wear away at our fragile defenses. We wept, breathless, broken, individually and collectively in pain. And then we stood up. We took the Torah scrolls back out of the ark. We danced. And that memory, too, is crystal clear. This week, I felt for the first time since that night in Tokyo that I could breathe. It was a different headline this time. The return of Israel's living hostages from Gaza signals a time to heal. 735 days late, the page on the calendar turned to October 8th. 2 years later, the people of Israel entered our after. The relative peace we have enjoyed this week is a fledgling and a fragile peace. I do not claim that all is healed, nor do I imagine that the road ahead will be easy. I only rejoice in the fact that at long last we can breathe. Finally, we can begin to stitch together that which has been torn apart. With our hearts full of such delicate hope, we honor the heartache and the joy that are our dual inheritance as members of the Jewish nation. As we read in the book of Ecclesiastes on Sukkot, there is a time for tearing down and a time for building up. Today, this week, we begin the sacred work of rebuilding that which has been destroyed. There is a time for war, and there is a time for peace. Today, we turn from the terror of the past towards the hope of the future and pray that the return of our living hostages is the first glimmer of a world in which Israelis and Palestinians can live as neighbors in mutual safety, prosperity, and dignity. There is a time for weeping and a time for dancing, and tonight we make space for both. We will recite the Kaddish to mourn for all that has been lost, all that can never be again. We still remember where we were on Simchat Torah last year and on the year before that. But so too will we dance with our holy scrolls, rejoicing in the resilience and strength of Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. So too shall we hold each other near and affirm the sweetness of life. So too shall we bask in the fact that finally it is the day after, the time for peace, the time for healing, the time for dancing. Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Holy One, bringer of peace, grant peace to us and all the people of Israel and all citizens of the world. And we say, Amen. Time for dancing has come, and I am so glad that it is here. I'd like to invite Lisa up to play some beautiful music on her violin for us as we dance with our beautiful, holy Torah scrolls that tell the story of our people, that we will finish reading and begin again. And I'd like to invite Rich up to help me carry him. Please rise.